The world knew him as the king of rock and roll. He was the man who freed a generation, the rebel who shook his hips on national television and changed music forever. But behind the heavy velvet curtains of Graceland, Elvis Presley was not a liberator. He was a captor, and his most prized possession was not a gold record, a Cadillac, or a guitar. It was a teenage girl he had molded from scratch. Most people look at the photos of Elvis and Priscilla from the 60s and see a fairy tale. They see the perfect couple, the matching jet black hair, the designer clothes, the undeniable glamour. But what you are actually looking at is a crime scene where a personality was systematically erased. This was not a romance. This was a project. To understand the darkness of this story, we have to go back to Germany, 1959. The world was obsessed with Elvis the soldier. Cameras followed his every move, but the cameras missed the most important detail. The girl he had just met at a party. Her name was Priscilla Beaulieu. She was shy. She was innocent, and she was in the 9th grade. She was only 14 years old. Elvis was 24. When they met, Elvis did not see a partner. He saw clay. He saw a blank canvas that had not yet been touched by the world. He told his friends that she was young enough that he could train her any way he wanted. This was the beginning of the grooming process that would steal her youth. For years, they communicated through letters and phone calls while she remained in Germany, and he returned to Hollywood. But the distance was just part of the trap. He kept her hooked, making her believe she was the only one, while he lived a wild life with movie stars. When she finally moved to Graceland at the age of 17, she thought she was entering a dream. In reality, she was walking into a golden cage with very specific rules. The transformation began almost immediately. The first thing to go was her identity. Elvis did not want a girl who looked like herself. He wanted a girl who looked like him. He took her to his private barber, not a salon. He ordered her beautiful sun-bleached brown hair to be dyed pitch black. Why? Because he wanted her to match his own hair color. He wanted to look into the mirror and see a female version of himself. It was not love, it was narcissism. But the hair was just the start. He controlled every single aspect of her appearance. One day he went through her closet and threw away her clothes. He told her that he did not like patterns. He said that patterns distracted people from looking at her and by extension from looking at him. He demanded she wear only solid colors: blue, white, black. He chose the fabrics. He chose the cuts. He turned a living, breathing teenager into a mannequin. His obsession with perfection went even deeper, into uncomfortable territory. He decided that her teeth were not perfect enough for the cameras. Although she had a normal, healthy smile, he forced her to get porcelain caps on her front teeth to close a tiny, almost invisible gap. He sent a teenager to a dentist to have her healthy teeth filed down, just to fit his aesthetic vision. Then came the makeup. Elvis instructed her on exactly how to apply her eyeliner: heavy, black, dramatic. He wanted her eyes to look heavy, almost sleepy. He wanted her to look like a porcelain doll. Priscilla later admitted that she was living his life, not hers. She said that she never appeared before him without full makeup. Even when she was sleeping, she had to be perfect, because in Elvis's world, reality was not allowed. Perhaps the most disturbing rule was the one about her mind. Elvis made it clear that she was not there to think. He told her that he did not like women who had opinions on politics, music, or world events. He said it was not attractive. Her job was to listen. Her job was to be there when he woke up and to be there when he slept. She was not allowed to have a career, hobbies, or friends of her own. She was isolated from her family, isolated from her peers, and completely dependent on him for her sense of worth. She once asked him, half-jokingly, if she was just his living doll. He didn't laugh. He just smiled and nodded. For him, that was the ultimate compliment. For her, it was a life sentence. But controlling her appearance was easy. Controlling her mind and her biological clock required something stronger than words. To keep his doll compliant, to keep her awake when he wanted to play and asleep when he wanted to rest, the king would introduce his teenage bride to his most dangerous habit. The pills were coming, and they would turn the fairy tale into a nightmare. But the control did not stop at her hair or her clothes. To truly possess someone, you must control their time, their energy, and their reality. Graceland did not run on normal time. It ran on Elvis time. The king was a creature of the night. He would wake up in the late afternoon, and his day would end at dawn. For a rock star, this was normal. But Priscilla was not a rock star. She was a high school student. Imagine the exhaustion of a teenager trying to live two completely different lives. By day, she was attending a strict Catholic girls' school, wearing a uniform and trying to focus on algebra. By night, she was expected to be the glamorous consort of the world's most famous man, watching movies until 4 in the morning or going to private amusement parks at dawn. Her body began to fail. She was constantly tired. She was fading. Elvis saw this, but he did not tell her to rest. He did not tell her to skip a night out. Instead, he offered a chemical solution. He introduced her to the pills. It started innocently enough. He would hand her a small pill and say, "This will help you stay awake." These were powerful amphetamines, the same drugs he took to keep his energy up on stage. When she took them, the exhaustion vanished, replaced by a jittery, artificial buzz. She could stay up all night, listening to his monologues, laughing at his jokes, being the perfect audience he demanded. But what goes up must come down. When the sun came up and Elvis finally wanted to sleep, Priscilla's mind was still racing from the stimulants. She would stare at the ceiling, her heart pounding. That is when the second phase of the chemical leash came into play. Sleeping pills, powerful sedatives to knock her out. This became her cycle, a pill to wake up, a pill to sleep, a pill to be happy, a pill to be calm. She was walking through her teenage years in a drug-induced haze. She later described herself as a zombie, floating through life, completely dependent on him to regulate her own body chemistry. She was not just emotionally dependent on him, she was now chemically dependent on his supply. This is how you ensure someone never leaves. You make yourself the source of their stability, even if you are the one causing the chaos. While the drugs controlled her mind, an even more confusing game was being played in the bedroom. The world assumed that Elvis Presley, the ultimate sex symbol, was having a wild, passionate relationship with his beautiful live-in girlfriend. The truth was far stranger and far more damaging to Priscilla's self-esteem. For 7 long years, Elvis enforced a strict rule. There would be no full intimacy. He called it the everything but rule. They did everything else, but the final act was forbidden until marriage. On the surface, this sounds like an old-fashioned, perhaps even noble commitment to tradition. But looking closer, it was another form of control. Elvis had a complex Madonna-Whore Complex. He needed Priscilla to remain the pure virgin, the unblemished angel waiting at home. If he touched her fully, the spell would be broken. She would become just another woman. But here is the twisted double standard. While he was protecting Priscilla's virtue at home, he was out in Hollywood having very public affairs with his co-stars. Priscilla would read about him with Anne Margaret in the newspapers. She would see the photos. She knew he was sleeping with other women. When she confronted him, he would deny it, or worse, he would manipulate her. He told her that those women meant nothing. He told her that she was the one he respected too much to tarnish before the wedding. But to a young girl, this did not feel like respect. It felt like rejection. She began to wonder what was wrong with her. Was she not sexy enough? Was she not beautiful enough? She tried harder. She applied more makeup. She wore the clothes he liked. She waited for him in the bedroom, hoping that tonight would be the night he finally saw her as a woman. But he would always stop. He would pull away. He would treat her like a fragile glass figurine that might shatter if held too tight. This constant push and pull created a deep insecurity in her. She was competing with the most beautiful actresses in the world, while being forced to live like a nun in a golden palace. He kept her in a state of perpetual anticipation. She was always waiting, waiting for him to come home, waiting for him to wake up, waiting for him to want her. And the cruelest part was that he knew exactly what he was doing. By withholding intimacy, he kept the power. He remained the prize that she had to earn. He was training her to be patient, to be submissive, and to accept whatever scraps of affection he threw her way. By the time she was 21, Priscilla was the most envied woman in America. She had the ring, she had the king, she had the beauty, but inside she was a medicated, sleep-deprived, insecure young woman who had been trained to believe that her only purpose in life was to please a man who could not even look her in the eye and tell her the truth. But the biggest test was yet to come. The wedding was approaching, and Priscilla believed that once they were married, the rules would change. She thought the everything but rule would disappear, and they would finally be a normal couple. She was wrong. The wedding night would not be the beginning of freedom. It would mark the beginning of the end. Because for a man like Elvis, the chase is everything. And once you catch the butterfly, you lose interest in watching it fly. The wedding took place on May 1st, 1967. It was the moment the world had been waiting for, The king finally married his princess. The photos from that day show a couple at the height of their beauty. Priscilla looked flawless, her makeup perfect, her dress stunning. Elvis looked proud. But in hindsight, that day was not a new beginning. It was the closing of a chapter. The chase was over. The doll was now officially in the box. For a brief moment, things seemed to change. The physical barriers that had existed for 7 years were finally lifted. Priscilla later described the early days of their marriage as passionate. She finally felt like a real woman, not just a waiting ornament. She thought she had won. She thought she had secured his heart and his desire forever. But biology has a way of disrupting even the most carefully controlled plans. Very soon after the wedding, Priscilla discovered she was pregnant. For most young couples, this is a moment of pure joy. For Elvis and Priscilla, it was complicated. Elvis was worried, not about money or the future, but about appearances. He was terrified of how fatherhood would affect his sex symbol image. But even more disturbing was his concern about Priscilla. He had created an image of her that was frozen in time, a perfect, slender, youthful figure. Pregnancy meant change. It meant her body would expand, her shape would shift. It was a deviation from the script he had written for her. During her pregnancy, Priscilla was terrified of losing her figure. She barely ate, trying to maintain the impossible standards he had set. She knew deep down that his love was conditional. It was tied to her visual perfection. On February 1st, 1968, Lisa Marie Presley was born. It should have been the happiest day of their lives. And in an emotional sense, Elvis was overjoyed. He loved his daughter. He was a doting, obsessed father. But while the birth of his daughter opened his heart to a new kind of love, it completely closed the door on his marriage. This is the part of the story that is the hardest to understand, but the most crucial to grasp. The moment Priscilla became a mother, she ceased to be a lover in Elvis's eyes. Psychologists call it the Madonna-Whore Complex. It is a psychological condition where men see women in two distinct, mutually exclusive categories. There is the Madonna, the saintly mother figure who is pure, nurturing, and to be respected. And then there is the whore, the sexual object who is to be desired and conquered. For men with this complex, these two cannot exist in the same body. You cannot desire the mother. It feels wrong. It feels taboo. It feels like incest. Elvis adored his own mother, Gladys. Her death had destroyed him. He put her on a pedestal so high that no one could reach it. When Priscilla gave birth, she ascended to that pedestal. She became mother. She became holy. And you do not touch holy things with lust. Priscilla felt the shift immediately. The intimacy that had finally started after the wedding came to a crashing halt. She was 22 years old. She was arguably more beautiful than she had ever been. She had snapped back to her pre-pregnancy weight almost instantly. She was young, vibrant, and alive. But when she reached for her husband in the night, he pulled away. He still told her he loved her. He still bought her expensive gifts. He still wanted her by his side. But he could not bring himself to make love to her. He started making excuses. He said he needed time. He said he was tired. But the truth was in his eyes. When he looked at her, he no longer saw the sexy teenager he had groomed in Germany. He saw a mother. Imagine the psychological torture of this rejection. Priscilla had spent her entire adolescence molding herself into exactly what he wanted. She had dyed her hair, fixed her teeth, changed her clothes, and taken the pills. She had followed every rule. She had waited 7 years for him. And now, just when she had done the one thing society told her was her ultimate duty, becoming a mother, she was punished for it. The bedroom became a lonely place once again. But this time, it was worse. Before marriage, there was the promise of someday. Now someday had come and gone. There was nothing left to wait for. To make matters worse, Elvis's wandering eye returned with a vengeance. Since he could not view his wife as a sexual being, he looked elsewhere for that release. He continued his affairs with renewed energy. He separated his life completely. The pure family life at Graceland with Priscilla and the baby, and the wild sexual life on the road with his entourage and other women. Priscilla was left in the golden cage, now with a baby in her arms. She was the queen of Graceland, but she felt like a widow. She tried to reignite the spark. She took dance classes. She tried new outfits. She tried to be the doll again. But the spell was broken. Elvis could not unsee her as a mother. This rejection planted a seed of doubt in Priscilla's mind that would eventually grow into a forest of resentment. She began to realize that no matter what she did, she could never win. If she was the innocent girl, he wouldn't touch her. If she was the mother, he wouldn't touch her. The only way to be desired by Elvis Presley was to be a stranger. She was trapped in a mansion filled with people, yet she had never been more alone. The pills were still there to numb the pain, but even the drugs couldn't hide the cold reality. She was sleeping next to a man who worshipped her, but didn't want her. And for a woman in her early 20s, that is a slow, agonizing kind of death. She began to look at the door, not yet ready to leave, but for the first time, wondering what lay beyond the gates of Graceland. The golden cage was beautiful, but it was airless. By 1972, Priscilla Presley was 27 years old. She had spent nearly half her life as Elvis's project. She had mastered the art of silence, the art of appearance, and the art of waiting. But the human spirit is resilient. You can suppress it with rules, you can numb it with pills, but eventually, it will fight for air. The catalyst for her awakening came from an unlikely source. Elvis, in his infinite wisdom, had suggested she take karate lessons. He thought it would be a good hobby for her, something to keep her busy while he was on tour. He introduced her to an instructor named Mike Stone. Elvis thought he was hiring a teacher. In reality, he was handing his wife the key to her prison cell. Mike Stone was everything Elvis was not. He was grounded, he was present, and most importantly, he listened. When Priscilla spoke, he didn't check her makeup or criticize her dress. He asked her what she thought. He asked her how she felt. For the first time in over a decade, a man was looking at Priscilla Beaulieu, the human being, not Priscilla Presley, the icon's wife. The affair that followed was not just about passion. It was an act of rebellion. It was a desperate claim for identity. When Priscilla was with Mike, she wasn't a mother, and she wasn't a doll. She was a woman with desires, opinions, and a voice. She realized that the emptiness she felt inside wasn't because she was broken. It was because she was starving for validation that Elvis was incapable of giving. When Elvis discovered the betrayal, his reaction was terrifying. It wasn't the heartbreak of a husband, it was the rage of an owner whose property had been stolen. He went into a spiral of paranoia and fury. There are dark stories from those days. Stories of Elvis pacing around Graceland with a gun, fantasizing about hiring a hitman to kill Mike Stone. His anger wasn't just about jealousy, it was about the loss of control. The narrative he had written for his life was falling apart. The script said the king gets the girl, keeps the girl, and the girl is grateful forever. Priscilla flipped the script. She shattered the illusion of his omnipotence. But the most courageous moment of this entire saga was not the affair. It was the departure. Leaving Elvis Presley was unthinkable. He was the most powerful man in entertainment. He had money, lawyers, and the love of the entire world. Priscilla had nothing. She had no career, no money of her own, and very little experience in the real world. Everyone told her she was crazy. Who leaves the king? But one afternoon, she packed her bags, she took her daughter, and she walked out of the front gates of Graceland. She didn't leave for Mike Stone. That relationship would eventually end too. She left for herself. She later said, "I did not divorce him because I didn't love him. He was the love of my life, but I had to find out about the world." The aftermath revealed the tragic truth of their dynamic. Without his living doll to control, Elvis unraveled. His weight ballooned, his drug use spiraled out of control, and his behavior became more erratic. He tried to fill the void with other women. Young beauty queens he tried to mold just like he had molded her, but it never worked again. He was chasing a ghost. 5 years after she left, on August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died on his bathroom floor. He was 42 years old, trapped in a body that had failed him and a myth that had consumed him. He died a prisoner of his own fame. Priscilla, on the other hand, survived. She not only survived, she thrived. She washed the black dye out of her hair. She stopped wearing the heavy makeup. She started businesses, became an actress, and eventually took control of Elvis's estate, turning it into a billion-dollar empire. She saved his legacy, even after he had tried to destroy her identity. The story of Elvis and Priscilla is often remembered as a great American love story. But if you look closely at the cracks in the porcelain, it is a cautionary tale. It is a story about the danger of putting people on pedestals. Elvis wanted a fantasy, not a partner. He wanted a doll that would stay in the box. But he forgot the most important rule of nature. Living things are not meant to be kept in boxes. They are meant to grow. In the end, the king lost his crown because he tried to rule the human heart with an iron fist. Priscilla Presley's journey from a 14-year-old girl in a school uniform to the matriarch of a dynasty is the ultimate victory. She escaped the shadow of the king to cast a light of her own. And that, more than any song or movie, is the true twist of this double life. The doll became real, and the creator faded away.